And now we are joined by Mr. Ambassador Mohamed Al Shazly. Hello, Mr. Ambassador, and welcome to our show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Obama's statements that said he postponed his threats to strike Syria after the Assad regime accepted the Russian proposal to gather and destroy the chemical weapons. What's your comment on this?
My comment is that the Arabs have lost control on their territories, and the future of the Arabs now is determined by external forces, especially the great forces. The balance in what is happening in Syria and what is going to happen in Syria is determined by the Americans, the Europeans, the Chinese and the Russians, and to an extent to the Turks. And the Arabs are just there as a decor and have no say in the future of one of the major Arab countries, and I think this is catastrophic.
Is there any proof that Syria has chemical weapons?
Let me say something. Syria has chemical weapons, but the point is
but did he use it really, or this is
very much to believe that the regime has used chemical weapons. Lately, the Syrian army and the regime was having the upper hand militarily, and the international community was having second thoughts about the resistance due to the fact that Al-Qaeda has infiltrated the opposition. There is a danger of the partition of Syria between the Kurds, the Turkmens, the Shiites, the Sunnis. The Iranians are involved. So the international community has been aware of the dangers of toppling down the regime. I don't think it is logical that the regime would choose this moment to use chemical weapons.
Do you believe it's an excuse by the American government,
I
like
think
what happened in Iraq?
It is, using the scenario of Iraq once more. In every detail, you had in Iraq, you started by satanizing Saddam Hussein and putting all the blame on him. Saddam Hussein was a very nasty man, and it was a very bad regime. But then the Kurds were not saints. The Kurds, the crackdown of Saddam Hussein on the Kurds was because they took advantage of the Syrians blocking their ports to the Iraqi imports from Europe, and all their trade came through Turkey and passed through the Kurdish area, and they started sabotaging and ambushing and asking for money to let free passage. That is why the Kurds have committed atrocities. They were not divided, they were not united as Kurds, but there were those Kurds who were pro-Iran and those Kurds who were pro-Iraq during the war, and they committed atrocities against each other and against Arab Iraqis. Nobody spoke about that. And then the opposition in Syria, they have committed heinous atrocities. It's not only Al-Assad who has committed atrocities. So, you are satanizing one party and disregarding the atrocities. The same scenario that has been committed in Iraq. And then,
but what is the difference? When George Bush went to war in Iraq, he said, "I'm going to war." But here, Obama is saying, "I need the approval of the Congress and the people." Why is there a difference?
It's a different approach, and I think the main obstacle was not the Congress. The main obstacle was the firm stand of the Russians and the firm stand of the Chinese, who want to keep their interests in the Middle East and do not want to surrender the Middle East to the United States. You know, the whole scenario is being played again. The same scenario in Iraq was let in the inspectors to inspect, look for chemical weapons and weapons of mass destructions, and the inspectors went in and they started, you know, asking extreme questions. Let us search the presidential palaces and so on. I think this is going to be repeated in Syria until they complete the solution of Syria, as has happened today. Today, Iraq is a united country by name only. The north is completely Kurdish. In the north, they have Kurdistan flags. No flags of Iraq are flown in the north. And in the south, they are the Shiites, and then in the middle, they are the Sunnis.
But can the American people here be deceived twice with the same scenario and the same words?
I mean, you know, in international politics, the people don't have a say. The interests have a say. There are big oil companies who have a stake in the Middle East. There are big exporting companies that have interests in the markets of the Middle East. There are media companies that want the attention of the Middle East. This is what determines foreign policy. You and me and the man in the street, we don't determine what our foreign policy is. It is the interests, especially in global powers like the United States. The man in the streets just wants his job, he wants his insurance, and so on. But
he wants to live, actually.
To live, actually.
Okay, what's your opinion about the Russian proposal, and will it lead eventually to a political settlement?
The Russian proposal, it is, you know, the difference between killing somebody by shooting him and killing him immediately and giving a slow-acting poison. I mean, as I told you before, the inspectors who are going to go and examine and look for the weapons of mass destruction and put them under their custody, this is a repetition.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, we are going now quickly for a break and we'll come back.